In the turbulent heart of 15th century England, two powerful royal houses clashed in a brutal contest for the throne. The Wars of the Roses, spanning over 3 decades, were not merely a series of battles. They were a dynastic civil war that tore a kingdom apart. Beneath the red rose of Lancaster and the white rose of York lay a story of ambition, betrayal, weak kingship, and political survival. From the chaos of Henry VI's reign to the rise of the Tudor dynasty, the Wars of the Roses left a permanent mark on English history and identity. The Wars of the Roses had their roots in the reign of King Edward III, 1327 to 1377, a formidable monarch who sired many sons. Among them were Edward the Black Prince, father of the future King Richard II, and John of Gaunt, founder of the House of Lancaster. Edward III's descendants produced rival claims to the throne. After the deposition and death of King Richard II in 1399, the crown passed to King Henry IV, John of Gaunt's son, establishing the Lancastrian dynasty. But it was a fragile inheritance. By the time King Henry VI came to the throne in 1422, England was war-weary and politically unstable. He was only 9 months old at his accession, and as he grew, it became increasingly clear that he lacked the temperament and intellect to rule. His long spells of mental illness and passivity allowed the nobility to grow dangerously powerful. Chief among them was Richard, Duke of York, a direct descendant of Edward III through both his father and mother, giving him a strong claim to the throne. As Henry's misrule deepened and Queen Margaret of Anjou took a more active and unpopular political role, York saw an opportunity. Open conflict erupted in 1455 at the First Battle of St. Albans. Though small in scale, it was symbolically the beginning of a civil war. Richard of York and his allies, including Richard Neville, Earl of Warwick, soon to be known as the Kingmaker, demanded reforms and redress for Lancastrian misrule. As violence escalated, the struggle shifted from political disagreement to dynastic war. In 1460, York was killed at the Battle of Wakefield, but his son, Edward of March, emerged as a formidable leader. At the Battle of Towton in 1461, fought in a snowstorm and reputedly the bloodiest battle on English soil, Edward defeated the Lancastrians decisively. With the support of Warwick, he was crowned King Edward IV, while Henry VI and Margaret of Anjou fled into exile. The Red Rose was in retreat. Edward IV's initial reign, 1461-1470, saw attempts at consolidation, but peace proved elusive. His marriage to the commoner Elizabeth Woodville alienated Warwick and many nobles. A personal and political rift developed, and Warwick, disillusioned and ambitious, switched sides. In an astonishing reversal, Warwick allied with Margaret of Anjou and restored Henry VI to the throne for a brief period in 1470. But Edward IV returned from exile with renewed support. In 1471, the Yorkists crushed the Lancastrians at the Battle of Tewkesbury. Prince Edward, Henry VI's only son, was killed, some say after capture. Shortly after, Henry VI died in the Tower of London, almost certainly murdered to eliminate any further Lancastrian threat. Warwick, the Kingmaker, also met his end in battle. Edward IV's grip on power was now secure. Peace and relative stability followed for the next decade at least. But when Edward IV died suddenly in 1483, his 12-year-old son, Edward V, was proclaimed king. But the young king never reached his coronation. His uncle Richard, Duke of Gloucester, was named Lord Protector. Within weeks, Edward and his younger brother were taken to the Tower of London and disappeared from public view, never to be seen again. Richard claimed that Edward IV's marriage to Elizabeth Woodville had been invalid, rendering his sons illegitimate. In July 1483, Richard took the crown for himself, effectively stealing it from his nephew, and was crowned King Richard III. His reign, though brief, remains one of the most controversial in English history. Many contemporaries and later chroniclers accused him of murdering his nephews. While modern historians debate the evidence, the fate of the princes in the Tower remains one of the greatest historical mysteries. Even in the present day, we have no definitive answer to their disappearance. Were they indeed murdered by their power-hungry Uncle Richard? Or did the matriarch of the Tudors, Margaret Beaufort, have them killed so that her son, later King Henry VII, could defeat Richard and take the throne? Either way, Richard's rule was troubled from the start. Many saw him as a usurper. Discontent brewed among former Yorkist allies and disaffected nobles. It was Henry Tudor, a relatively obscure Lancastrian exile with a tenuous claim to the throne, who would capitalize on the unrest. In August 1485, Henry Tudor landed in Wales with a modest army and advanced into England. On 22nd August at the Battle of Bosworth Field, Richard III's forces met Henry's. Though outnumbered, Henry benefited from key betrayals within Richard's camp, including that of Lord Stanley, whose timely intervention proved decisive. Richard III died fighting bravely on the battlefield, reportedly shouting, "A horse! A horse! My kingdom for a horse!" His crown was found in the mud and placed upon Henry Tudor's head. The House of York was broken. The Wars of the Roses were over. Henry was crowned King Henry VII. He soon married Elizabeth of York, uniting the Red Rose of Lancaster with the White Rose of York. This symbolic marriage birthed the Tudor dynasty, which would rule for over a century and preside over one of the most transformative periods in English history. The Wars of the Roses were not just a series of battles, but a violent reckoning with questions of legitimacy, loyalty, and authority. Over 30 years, the conflict led to the deaths of thousands, the destruction of noble houses, and the erosion of faith in hereditary monarchy. It was also a crucible for change. Out of this bloodshed came a new political order, stronger monarchy, diminished nobility, and the seeds of the English Renaissance. Culturally, the conflict has endured through the works of Shakespeare, especially Henry VI and Richard III, and in modern retellings such as The White Queen, The Hollow Crown, and the fantasy epic Game of Thrones, which drew heavily from the war's themes and characters. Though the white and red roses were later romanticized, the Wars of the Roses were anything but delicate. They were a savage, unpredictable struggle where loyalty shifted like the wind and ambition knew no bounds. Yet from this darkness emerged the Tudors and a reimagined England, one no longer simply ruled by bloodline, but reshaped by survival, power, and political savvy. The legacy of the Wars of the Roses is not just in who won or lost, but in how the conflict redefined what it meant to be a king, and what price a kingdom would pay for peace.